Pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all.
So with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this wonderful land of ours, I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we face and that affects so many areas of our lives, from our interpersonal relationships to our business affairs, even our politics. Every aspect of our life is affected by this issue, and we're going to be having an interesting discussion today about it, and I invite you to join the conversation at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. And if you have any problems at all on that line, a secondary number to call is 501-258-8326. That's 501-258-8326. And I'll be happy to take your call. I'm broadcasting remotely tonight from remote studios in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I'm visiting family for the next week. So maybe the quality is not the usual quality for you tonight, but we'll hope to make the program interesting for you. We're going to be continuing our discussion on narcissism and our narcissistic age and the factors responsible for it. And I have a real treat for you tonight. I have my brother, Joe Simon, a wonderful defense attorney who I've had on the program before, and who has to deal with this kind of thing every day. He defends two types of folks. He defends those folks who are basically of decent character, who make those tragic mistakes that even folks of decent character make, and they get themselves in trouble, and they find themselves needing a really good lawyer. And then he also defends those folks who have some significant character defects, shall we say, and understanding them and what makes them tick and what has made their lives a shipwreck, and how to not feel too bad when you've bailed them out of some trouble and hope that they get things straightened out and learn a decent lesson. That's a whole other thing. So we're going to be talking about some of that tonight. And as I said, if you want to join the conversation, please give us a call at 718-717-8296 or at 501-258-8326. Maybe you have a situation that you're dealing with that you want some advice on. Maybe you are a professional who's attended one of the workshops lately, and you have a case that you'd like to discuss. Whatever the case may be, give us a call. We'll be happy to put you on the air. Let me mention, with respect to the workshops, my long 18-month tour has come to a close, and I am really taking a break from active touring. But I will be going to the New York and New Jersey area in August, in middle and late August. And I've got information for you on the blog at manipulative-people.com or drgeorgesimon.com. Either URL will take you there. I've got information there about those workshops. And you can also go to the vineeducation.com website. That's VYNE, Vine Education. You can go to their website and get information about the workshops as well. And of course, make yourself available to the many articles on the website and blog, the numerous articles, timely topics dealing with character-disturbed people in your life and how to get the right kind of help. And my books, of course, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age, The Judas Syndrome, and my book for relationship partners trying to navigate their way through this character-disordered world of ours. How Did We End Up Here? My book with co-author Dr. Kathy Armistead. And a word about that, too. Be looking for at the end of the summer our fifth book, my second with co-author Dr. Armistead, The 10 Commandments of Character, How to Lead a Significant Life. It should be available at the end of the summer. It's a great expansion on the topic first raised in character disturbance about those essential life lessons that we have to learn to turn out decent people. And they're not just lessons that we have to learn in childhood, but lessons that we need to learn at any point along the way in life to turn out decent and responsible folks. So once again, if you want to join the conversation, the numbers to call are either 718-717-8296 or 501-258-8326 if you have trouble with that first number. Sometimes we are still having problems with phones logging in or trying to call in on that first line. You can also Skype at George K. Simon. That's the Skype name. You can also Skype, and we'll try to patch you in as well. With no further ado, I want to introduce my brother, Joe. We're going to have a nice conversation today. We're going to get a little bit political, I think, at times. Joe, as I mentioned, is a criminal defense attorney. He works with a lot of folks who have made some major mistakes in life, shall we say. And like I said, sometimes these are basically very decent folks who have just made a horrible mistake, and they're paying for it, and they need a good defense attorney. But sometimes these are folks who whose lives are a shipwreck because they haven't gotten it together yet. They haven't figured out how it all is supposed to work, or maybe they have figured out how it's supposed to work, but they're just kind of again things. Maybe they just understand how the rules are supposed to go, but they're still in opposition and still in defiance of all the major rules, and they're making a mess of things. So we're going to talk about that and about the aspects of our culture that have made for the problems that we're seeing. So welcome to Character Matters, Joe.
Great to be with you, George. Great to be with my big brother.
Thank you. It's very sobering to think that I am as old as I am and that much older than you. My brother Joe is 12 years younger than I am, and that is a difficult thing to accept. I see we do have a caller, so welcome to Character Matters.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome to Character Matters.
Thank you. So, I don't know if I'm on the air now, or I need
Yes,
to
you
tell
are.
you what I want to
Yes,
do.
you are.
Okay. Hi. So, I just read your book, and I just heard your interview with Dr. Northrup a couple of weeks ago.
Which book did you read?
The In Sheep's Clothing.
Okay.
And just recently, about a week and a half ago, my friend, very close friend, passed away, and she has complained for, she's older and got married in her 60s, about this guy's manipulation. And now that the two daughters and myself are helping plan the memorial, I'm having an experience of that. And I was just curious, it's like every time any of us have a suggestion, basically we get guilted, and I feel like I get kicked in the gut, and until he gets his way. And I was just curious, we'd like to get through the memorial, which is on Thursday, but, at this point, the daughters are crying, and I was supposed to sing at the wedding, and he didn't want me to do it. And so, I've pulled back, but I still want to be present.
When you say you were supposed to sing, had somebody asked you to sing?
The daughters asked me, and then he vetoed it.
And you're feeling that this was something that not only the daughter would have wanted, but that others in the family would have wanted too?
Well, she had asked me before she passed, a couple years ago to sing. And then the daughters, I've been at the various events with the family. My girlfriend's, I officiated at her father's and mother's, and I've sung at her daughter's wedding. And so, yes, I think she would have wanted me there, but,
Well, there's absolutely nothing that can stop you and her daughters from honoring her and even honoring her memory with a song. If he's putting up a fuss about you doing that in the official context of the service, and because he does have say here,
yes.
You can just as well honor that and still honor her wishes and honor her daughter's wishes at some private little ceremony, or maybe just a little moment of remembrance that you could stage yourselves. There's nothing he can do to prevent you from expressing the well wishes that you want to express. So this doesn't really have to be a contest of who wins. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And I had said that to the daughters that we could do it separately. So it's nice to hear it again, that maybe I was tracking it okay.
Yeah. You need to make your decisions based on what you know in your heart to be right, rather than on the guilt trip that he's trying to throw.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's helpful. And just in terms of, is there something I can do to help the daughters cope? Because I think he's a very strong personality. And
there you're dealing in difficult territory. How old is this daughter?
They're both adults with children, so they're like in their 30s.
Yeah. I think you get in there to taking a different role, and you're getting yourself perhaps in a little bit of a sticky situation. So best to just be as supportive as you can, and basically stay out of territory that might get you kind of stuck in the mud, so to speak.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thanks for calling in.
All right.
Bye-bye. Well, that was a good call from someone who is apparently listened to the interview with Dr. Christiane Northrup. I wanted to mention that. I forgot to mention it earlier. Dr. Northrup is going to be doing a series of online trainings, and I'm going to be going out to California and working with her and setting up some of these trainings. So look for some information both on her website and on her radio show page, as well as look for some information to come out online in the form of advertisements for this program. It'll be later this year. I'll have more on it for you in the next few weeks or so. But as I mentioned earlier, my brother Joe Simon, criminal defense lawyer, is in the studio with me tonight, and we wanted to have a good discussion about the phenomenon of our time and the cultural factors that are responsible for the kinds of problems that we're seeing. And as I mentioned before, if you're just tuning in, maybe you didn't hear, my brother represents two kinds of individuals. Those individuals who are basically decent sorts, who have screwed up in one way or another. They've made a major mistake. They're still basically decent people, but they made a horrible error in judgment, and they're paying for it, and they need good legal defense. And then he also deals with those folks who are more chronic problems because their lives are a shipwreck, not so much because they made a simple or singular mistake, but because they have significant flaws in their character. And he's seen it all. So once again, welcome to the program, Joe. And I really envy you in your work, or I probably should say I don't envy you that much because I know it must be very difficult work. I know that you see these two different kinds of people. I wonder if it affects you differently when you are dealing with somebody who you know you're basically giving a second chance to, but who might not really take that second chance all that seriously and may not use it as an opportunity to straighten out their lives.
It's a little bit heartbreaking. One of the strengths and weaknesses I have, I think, in my profession is that I do wear this very much on me. It taxes me pretty hard. I think that helps drive me to be the best I can be at my job, but it also has a taxation. And yeah, when you see people not take opportunities or second chance when you provide that, it is a little heartbreaking. It does bring a little bit on your back. But I want to, before I lose my stripes as a criminal defense attorney, add a third class of person. There are folks that I represent, most people don't like to acknowledge, that are just simply wrongfully accused.
Oh, yes.
Now, so I don't want to lose my stripes there. But segueing that point into character matters, there are a fair amount of people that may not be guilty of crimes that I passionately defend that have put themselves in a situation, even though they're not guilty of a crime, because they've made real bad character choices. Mm-hmm. Or maybe I should say that a different way, bad choices because of character. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Maybe put themselves in a morally compromising position. I could talk a lot. I don't know how far anecdotal you want me to get, but especially in campus environments. My practice is in a town of a major university, and I see a lot of young people who put themselves in that position all the time.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I think I was hearing a discussion about the revision of most campus standards, statutes with regard to policies with regard to especially sexual assault. I know things have really tightened up there. And, there's a lot of things that go on college campuses that reflect the sign of our times, in my opinion, reflect the lack of good character development. And it's not that these things haven't always gone on, but there seems to be a kind of amazing inconsistency to me. On the one hand, people want to have maximum freedom to just do whatever and take license and put themselves in very, very risky situations.
Well, boy, you couldn't have said that better, in my view.
And in days past, when people put themselves in really risky positions, knowingly doing so, in days past, we used to hold them accountable too for that horrible decision making. These days, it seems that if people put themselves in risky positions and then something bad happens, it's not their fault.
Well, I have to almost check myself on how passionately I want to respond to that. First of all, I agree with that. But not only is it not their fault, but they'll have 20 new best friends immediately promoting that way of thinking that are supplied usually by, in a college context, the university itself or other organizations. Let me just say.
No, we should right off the bat qualify that we are not in any way saying that when someone knowingly and irresponsibly takes advantage of someone who is in a state where they cannot consent, we are not in any way suggesting that person is not culpable for an egregious, not only an act of misjudgment, but an egregious act of violence toward another person.
Absolutely right.
So
that's true. But you know what? Sexual assault on campuses, for example, the statistics are going up, and people are always very alarmed when they hear sexual assaults are going up. They're at dramatic rates. And what's really happened is, in my view, I quickly point out that one of the reasons that the statistics go up is not only thought that the behavior is increasing, it's actually what is enveloped in the definition of a sexual assault. You talked earlier about how things are being redefined. That's true all the time. So many things are enveloped, and you're right. We're in an overly permissive environment. Campus intoxication has become an enormous issue of all varieties. It is a far different experience today, and I've been doing my job 31 years from where I started to now, and absolutely that's a major contributor to the expanded definition of sexual assault, because many times we have young people that are involved themselves in terribly morally compromising positions, and then in the aftermath, people look back and say what happened, and actually has enveloped into that definition of potential assaultive behavior. What's really disturbing is when you look at that behavior, how little trouble people have with their own conduct.
Mm-hmm.
Things that may have shocked us a short time ago don't shock anymore.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure it was that short a time ago, but yes, it seems like the bar keeps moving, does it not, about what it takes to shock us?
Tremendous. You couldn't be more right. Tremendously. And what I find is, staying again with that college theme, is how the parents, I would have been humiliated beyond belief if our parents knew anything about my sexual endeavors. I mean, anything. Mm. But when you have a situation that comes into my office like what we're talking about, and the parents not only know all the detail, but are actually okay with it,
mm-hmm.
That is a strange thing for me to reconcile. Now you talk about feeling old, I feel old. Anyway.
Yeah, another thing that this is a general issue, and I really like your opinion on this. It seems like we go through different phases of different attitudes with respect to particular crimes. For example, I can remember when it was considered to be a pretty antisocial thing to be a reckless abuser of substances. Everybody has known the dangers. Everybody knows what kinds of irresponsible things you can do when you're not in your right mind. And it was considered to be, especially given the dangers, and especially considering what you could do irresponsibly under the influence, was considered to be basically a reflection of bad character to make that choice. Now, it's a disease. It's always a disease. Even when it's not a true addiction, it's an addiction. And our attitude has changed from, we don't want to just punish people. We want to rehabilitate them. They need treatment. They're sick. And sometimes it can be true that a person slides down that slippery slope from legitimate prescription use to some kind of more powerful addiction. Sometimes that happens. It doesn't happen as often. People get reckless. They, in their grandiosity, think that they can get away with what everybody has been telling them all over the media that they probably can't get away with. In our day and time, there's so much information out there about the dangers and the risks that almost anybody would have to be a fool or would have to be pretty grandiose to think that they would be the exception to the rule, that they could somehow safely indulge and not pay a price at some point. So we used to hold it as a matter of personal responsibility, and our attitude has completely changed about it. Now, when it comes to other things, like, for example, where we are evolving with regard to sexual behavior, our attitudes are very, very different. And I wonder what they'll be 20 years from now. It just seems we go through phases. where we change our attitudes about things.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. That's certainly my experience as well. But I'd probably want to ask you back why you think that is. Are we just simply lowering the bar? Are we just becoming more permissive? You once told me, and I'm sure you've written about, I know you've written about this, that, and I'm not going to say the right words, you're going to correct me, that psychology, the quote-unquote modern psychology, was written in a repressive era for a repressed time. And then today, it doesn't necessarily apply the rules there because we're in this permissive time. You're going to say it better than me.
Well, here's what I think has happened. You know, life used to be a little simpler because we had the wisdom of the ages passed down from generation to generation. And there were certain life lessons that had been so well taught through so many different cultures and through so many different generations that the wisdom of the age said, you know, when it comes to certain things, certain really important things, the essentials, there's the incidentals in life, there's the little stuff, and then there's the big stuff. When it comes to the big stuff, like marriage, like responsible social conduct, like education, et cetera, et cetera. When it comes to some of the big things in life that really, raising a family, having babies, when it comes to that stuff, generation upon generation upon generation had given us the wisdom of all kinds of trial and error and said, look, we've been through this before, time and time and time again. We have decided based on years and years and years, eons of experience, that these are the basic ground rules. These are the rights and the wrongs. This is how you craft a marriage. This is how you don't. This is how you craft one that will last. This is how you raise a child to be responsible. This is how you don't. We have those basic rules. All that's relative now. We want to dissect them all and rewrite them based on trial and error. Well, who says? Who says that we can't do it a different way, basically, is our retort. And so it seems like the pendulum just swings back and forth as we kind of test all these things that were actually already tested for us for generations, for many generations. And we were handed that wisdom. We were handed that wisdom, and we looked it right in the eye and we said, hey, you know what? I actually think I know better. That's the narcissism of our age. That's narcissism in a heartbeat right there. That's the very definition of it.
Well, you know, when you talk about narcissism, you changed my view of that topic greatly a couple of years ago when you discussed with me the difference between a narcissist, as I understood what that term meant, a vulnerable person who was insecure on the inside, who had to project a certain way. And then you spoke about the difference between that and a grandiose narcissist. And when you talked about that, a person who genuinely believes these things about themselves, well, that resonated. But then, like a thunderous gut punch, you said something else about that type of narcissist. You said that type of person does not recognize a higher power. Well, before you went on to...
It's more than that. They can barely even conceive of one, let alone recognize one.
Well, you know, before you quickly explained that you weren't talking about necessarily religion, that hit me like a gut punch, because there are people that I know that are so much like that. And I just even hearing that, and then when you further explained, you meant no other higher power than themselves?
Than themselves, that's correct.
Well, that almost undid me. The truth of that was powerful to me. Because like dominoes, people in my life or people I've represented or people, here, let me just come out and say, judges I've practiced in front of, other lawyers, the dominoes really fell because that just had a powerful truth to it. And that's foreign to me. The first type of narcissism, I have understanding. I can get how that happens. Right. The other one, I can't fully understand.
And what we know from the research, too, is that over the past several decades, it's that grandiose type of narcissism. And I have, for the listeners out there, I have many, many articles on the blog. Go do a search on the blog at manipulative-people.com or drgeorgesimon.com. Either URL will take you to the same place. Do a search and you'll find tens of articles on this very topic. Also, you have my books, Character Disturbance or In Sheep's Clothing or The Judas Syndrome or How Did We End Up Here? You'll hear me make in some of the earlier editions of my work the comparison between the more neurotic type of narcissist and the character disturbed kind of narcissist. And that's analogous to what the literature today refers to as the vulnerable type versus grandiose type. So you'll find a wealth of information in any of the books or on the blog about this. But what the research is telling us is that over the past several decades, the grandiose type of narcissist has been increasing. So the percentage of folks who are of this other type is much greater than it used to be. So there's got to be some cultural factors at work there producing that. And I see two things. It's the age of entitlement. It is without question the age of entitlement. And people do not have a sense of indebtedness to anything or anyone. So that's one thing. The other thing is that we can have just about anything we want. And we can have it relatively quickly. It's not really necessary to have to pay that big a price for many of the things that we want. So that really reinforces that attitude of entitlement that we develop. And so the fact that we have so much and that we are in this age of entitlement, those two factors, I think, are really responsible for folks basically thinking, and without any kind of compensation for any underlying insecurity, basically thinking that they're all that and that they can and should be able to have whatever they want, whenever they want it. And they don't feel a sense of indebtedness or obligation.
Well, the second thing you said, I'd like to ask you more about the immediacy of quick gratification, of getting things that you want and getting them quickly. I often tell my kids that when we wanted a toy or that we mailed away for, it said, expect 6 to 8 weeks for delivery. And they meant 6 to 8 weeks for delivery. And those were the most lonely walks to the mailbox every single day with anticipation, and nothing was there. But I also tell them there was something really good about the wanting. There was something really good about the final payoff. There was something rewarding about the anticipation and the experience of sometimes you were greatly disappointed when that product finally arrived. The X-ray glasses, by the way, didn't really work. But there was also something good about that experience. And that is so not how things happen today. There is no term of delay or experience of that patience. The number one thing that I see currently in my office is anxiety. Now, that's your job, right? But I cannot tell you the number of phone calls I get because just people are so anxious. Despite my admonitions, the process won't go quickly. This is going to take time. This is not going to open for weeks. This may not open for months. People call me, have you heard anything? Have you heard anything? I get that question so much that I've developed a standard answer, which is, it's not like I've heard something and I'm going to keep it from you.
Yeah, they don't want to wait. And they're impatient and want that immediate relief from any anticipation.
How that relates to narcissism, though, I never would have put that together.
Well, here's what the research is telling us, and my clients taught me this well over 30 years ago when I was first writing. What they taught me is that the antidote is gratitude, and now the research backs that up. There's a guy by the name of Emmons, and he has done all this. He and his colleagues have done all this research. Gratitude is the only thing that can beget a sense of obligation. Well, it starts by feeling indebted. And then once you feel indebted, you feel obliged to give something back. So let's go back to your mailbox story. Waiting. And let's say that what comes is not a disappointment.
Right.
You're so happy and you're so grateful when it finally arrives. All that patience paid off.
Right.
All that anticipation paid off. All the effort that you put forth to secure it paid off. Now you've got this thing. And you're so grateful. And you cherish it. And maybe you take care of it. When you can have anything immediately, you don't have to wait. You barely have to earn. And if it's not what you expect, throw it away and get something else. When all that comes so easy, it's so hard to develop any sense of gratitude for anything. And without gratitude, there's no sense of indebtedness. And without that, there's no felt obligation to give back. And that's where that sense of entitlement takes over.
Not only does that make great sense to me, but let me ask you this. You made me think of a question. Is it also, when you're talking about narcissism, that when it comes that easily, you can attribute to self? I got this. I achieved this quickly. This is given to me because I deserve this.
Yeah, I deserve it. That's what the brain says. You know, I deserve it. I'm entitled. Simply because I want it. It appeared. It's like we used to call this in psychology magical thinking. Kids have to overcome this when they're very young. They wish for things and then they happen and they think, "Hey, I did that. I just wished for it and it came." And that kind of magical thinking that I can just make things happen. Well, it seems like we don't grow out of that. Seems like we don't. Most people have no idea. Most people, for example, have no idea how the whole system works. They don't have this higher awareness of all the players in the system and how goods reach the table and how someone's sweat someplace else led to something else. And this happens, I hate to say this, but this happens actually more frequently in disadvantaged communities where they're not actually participating for various reasons. It's not their fault they're not participating, but they're not participating. So they're even further removed from how it all works. They just know that somehow the smartphone exists.
Right.
And it can do wonderful things. And you know what? You can actually have one without even paying for it. Isn't that amazing? And you can do all kinds of things with it. As a matter of fact, you can buy all kinds of things with it, and you don't have to pay for that either, because you know what happens? Even though you run up all the bills on your card, when you don't have the money to pay for it, you simply default, and somebody else picks up the tab. It's just amazing how many things you can have for free.
You know what, George, you're making me think of the old line our parents would say, half in jest and whole in heart. When we would complain about something, the answer was invariably, it builds character. Mm. And as you're telling me this, I'm thinking, that wasn't wrong. If you were complaining that thing didn't arrive in the mailbox, it builds character. If you were complaining you were working too hard, it builds character. If you were complaining about whatever, that line, it builds character. Well, there's a real truth to that.
Okay, so you give me this great lead line here into my shameless self-promotion. Can't resist this one, folks. Dr. Kathy Armistead and I go back a ways. She is my co-author on How Did We End Up Here? And she used to be my editor, actually, at Abingdon Press. And she was the person who actually reached out to me and asked me to write a book that I never thought that I'd write from a spiritual perspective in the Judas Syndrome. So she became my co-author a few years back, and we wrote How Did We End Up Here? And she told me, George, this 10 Commandments of Character that you mentioned in Character Disturbance, if you don't write a book on this, I'm going to write it for you. And she did. And I'm the one that's been hanging it up in final edits because I've been on the road doing these workshops, so I haven't completed it. But these are the essential lessons that I think anybody has to learn to emerge a decent person in adulthood. And it's not just that you have to learn them when you're younger. Of course, it's better when you learn them when you're younger. But you have to learn them at some point along the way. And I unfortunately, in my practice as a therapist, I see people who are just kind of getting clued in their 60s today. That's a commentary on our time and culture. That anybody would be just kind of getting it in their 60s. To me, that's a pretty sad statement. In one sense, it's refreshing that at least they're finally getting it, but it's also a sad commentary on the culture of our time. But these commandments, for example, commandment number 1, you're not the center of the universe. You're a small part of a much bigger, greater reality, more vast, more complex, more awesome than you can possibly comprehend. So you need to be mindful of your presence here and the impact that you have on everything and everyone else. You know, that's one of those essential life lessons that you have to learn. Second commandment is you're not entitled to anything. Every breath you draw, your very life itself is an unearned gift. You had nothing to do with it. It came from someplace. If you strive to be grateful for what you've got, and you really revere this awesome gift that you have, that gratitude is going to translate into a sense of indebtedness, and that's going to translate into a sense of wanting to give back something of yourself to make this whole thing, this whole enterprise work. These are lessons that have to be learned, and unfortunately, we're just not learning them. They're not being actively taught, for one reason. Parents have kind of abdicated the character formation part of raising children.
Can I stop you? Because I see that myself. But why? Why do you think that is?
Because we kind of thought we haven't needed to. It's not necessary. I was mentioning this at a workshop the other day. Just to give you an example of how unnecessary it is. I know I'm old. You kid me about that all the time.
I'm sorry to say but it's true.
I'm pushing 70. But I tell my folks at the workshops all the time, I'm not that old because I can still remember when it didn't matter how much talent you had. If there was any chance that you were going to bring the team dishonor, there was any chance that your character was such that you were going to tarnish the image or the reputation of the team, you could have talent out the wazoo. You were not getting on that team. So there was a requirement there. There was a character requirement. It paid to make sure you had some. You don't need it anymore in our culture because they will throw attention at you. They will deify you. They will pay you gazillions of dollars just because you have talent, and they don't demand your character.
Well, that's certainly true. That resonates as true with me on so many levels, not just sports, which is a great example, but just in everyday existence too.
So why should you have to pay a price when something's free?
Well, here's my thinking on that. It's not just when you talked about people being far removed. In that situation, it's not just the labor of having to pay the price, but it's not experiencing the formula. I mean, when you say the phrase pay the price, it almost looks like somebody's almost avoidant of having to do why should I have to work like that other so-and-so when I can make an easy, quick path? But it's also a little bit different than just the labor of it. It's also the being removed from the formula toward developing as a person.
Yeah, well, I'm going to get a little political here, just a little political, because, frankly, and I'm not picking on just one person here, because when I look at that cast of characters that we had in the last election, and I'm talking about the whole cast of characters, it was enough to make any reasonable person nauseous. There was no shortage of character disturbance or narcissism in that field of candidates. Say perhaps one person who I disagreed with vehemently about just about everything, but I thought had character. and if I were forced to make the choice, as much as I would have been against, I think half the policies, I might have voted for him just because I thought he was a decent person. But that's really beside the point I'm trying to make here. But the point I'm trying to make is that we have become all too accustomed to the fact that character doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter anymore, even though in the long run, the ages will teach us. We'll have to learn the hard way about how it does matter. But when you can become filthy rich, you can even become president of the United States, when you can wield all the power there is in the world, and character is not demanded of you to do it, then we've got big trouble. And that's the soup we're in. You know, we've grown up with the adage from Lord Darfur Acton, who said that power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right.
He is dead wrong about that. I point this out at workshops all the time. Think of a newborn child and the power that you have. It's the power of life or death. Absolute power. They are totally helpless, totally at your mercy. Most of us don't come to that awesome sense of power and have it go right to our heads and abuse it. Most of us come to that sense of power with some awe and some reverence for the delicate fragility of life, for the preciousness of life, with an equal sense of responsibility, with an awesome fear of the power that we hold and how we could misuse it if we're not careful. Most of us come to that enterprise that way. So if power inherently corrupted, or if having that much power were inherently totally corrupting, no infant on this planet would have ever survived. Lincoln had it exactly right. He said, if you want to test a person's character, then give them some power, sit back, and watch how they use it. Watch what they do with it. That will tell you everything you need to know about them. I think he had it right. Acton had it wrong. And what we see playing out, unfortunately, in our politics, in our businesses, everywhere, is the effect of massive character disturbance in our culture. And we will have to pay the price. And then we'll have to come to the conclusion, like ages before did. They came to the conclusion that it mattered. And for years, for centuries, it did, until it didn't anymore. And we're going to have to learn the lesson all over again. History, we are doomed, I'm afraid, to repeat. That's just the way it is.
Makes sense, unfortunately. Can I ask you, do you think that when the pendulum, when the crash happens, what would be the thing that revives? Is it just suffering the consequences?
Suffering is always redemptive. Well, it's not always redemptive, but suffering can be tremendously redemptive. And I think we need to suffer. You know, one of the things that brought us to a period of great prosperity and ushered in a great generation, because we haven't always been great. You know, this country, we've gone through cycles of exploitation, cycles of greatness. But what really tested our mettle was the Second World War.
Right.
And we came out of that. And we came out of the horrors of it. I don't know if have you ever been to the Holocaust Museum?
Right.
I mean, you know, you can't look at the pictures and not think about the horrors that were perpetrated during that time. People came out of that experience, and that greatest generation built a culture and a society that led to fantastic prosperity.
But you know what? Let me use your own word right there. Sure, people will point to national pride. Sure, people will talk about patriotism, but the real thing that was underneath all that was gratitude Just what you pointed out earlier, gratitude for who we were as a nation and the common embrace of that and wanting to make that. How many people of that generation uttered the words, we need to make a better place for our children?
Yep.
How many people of that? I don't really hear that too much these days, but that there was a real gratitude and there was an enormous sense of pride in the accomplishment. You know, when you use the word great, I'm going to go right into the political thing. It was not a bad thing to strive to be the best you could be when I was growing up. It wasn't a bad thing to try to be great. It wasn't a bad thing to try to achieve. It wasn't a bad thing to, like at post-World War II, to build our country and our infrastructure and our highways and big buildings. Those weren't bad things because they had a purpose of wanting to be the best you could be, to share that with all, to be the best person you could be, to be the best producer you could be the best dad you could be. I find today people's seeking of greatness is just about the greatness. It's not about anything beyond that. I use my new line
no
is
recognition or respect of a higher power.
Like I said, that hit me like a gut punch when you told me that. But you know, they say necessity is the mother of invention. Today, it's laziness is the modern day mother of invention. Things that make things convenient for yourself. That's how we get inspired today to invent. And I really believe that's true. But going back to politics, you know, you and I joke about. I'm very focused, almost obscenely focused on something Trump said when he was talking about words. I have words, and the next reflexive line was, I have the best words. and that was just such a thing that stuck with me. I have the best words.
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up, can you? You know, we're getting close to the end of the hour here, and I want to make sure that anybody who wants to call in gets the number again, either 718-717-8296 or 501-258-8326. We'll get you in to talk to us. My brother Joe Simon is here tonight. We've been talking about the cultural aspects fueling the cultural factors fueling our age of entitlement and narcissism. But you talked about greatness. I want to get a plug in here for our theme song, America, My Home, because 4th of July is going to be coming up. We're already getting requests in from folks for performance permissions at various venues. The song has a message about greatness. When my wife and I were inspired to write this song, what was on my mind more than anything else is where America's greatness really lies. And I say this all the time when I'm talking about the song. What I hoped it would inspire is that we would recognize where the greatness really comes from. We have incredible military might. We're the we're the only superpower militarily in the world today. We have unbelievable economic clout. You know, China is going to outpace us. They're going to outstrip us in GDP, but they have bazillions of people. So, you know, that's inevitable. But as far as our standard of living per capita and what we have here, as far as the depth of our economy, we're a giant. But our greatness has never been in our military might or our economic power. It's always been in the character of our people. Because freedom and character go together. They're completely interdependent. When you give really decent people maximum freedom, people who have a solid internal moral compass, they know what's right, they know what's wrong, they respect the needs of the greater, and they work for the greater good. When you give these people absolute freedom, freedom from unnecessary intrusion, freedom from too much regulation, they prosper and they create opportunities for everybody else. When people behave irresponsibly, there's always the temptation of government to start curtailing freedom. because that's the only way they could figure out how to control things. Freedom and character are completely interdependent. You can't have freedom without responsibility. And so where our greatness has always been is in the character of our people who understand the essential values that make it all work, because it's on them that the very survival of freedom depends. And that's really the message of the song, which is why it warms my heart when I get performance requests. So that, folks, that was not so subtle. That was a that was a deliberate invitation for you who are thinking about performing at your 4th of July events to go to the blog and website, either drgeorgesimon.com or manipulative-people.com will get you there. Click on the tab for the song, get its history and whatnot, find out how to get the music. And if you're one of the ones that wants to carry the message, then give me a call. I'll be happy to send you what you need for a performance at your 4th of July event. Well, Joe, I can't tell you how great it's been to talk with you again. I hope you'll come on the program again sometime. You know, we can do this remotely. We live in such a technologically advanced age. We can do almost anything from anywhere.
Yeah, I'd love it. I really would.
So
the dialogue is very interesting, not only because it affects us all in everyday life, but it's also particularly interesting for me in my everyday professional life. And I'd love that.
So just again to mention to the audience a few things. I'm not doing any more workshops other than the workshops that I have scheduled for the New York City and New Jersey area coming up in August. I've agreed to do 4 or 5 workshops in person a year now, instead of the grueling schedule that I've had for the past 2 years. So go to the website, drgeorgesimon.com or manipulative-people.com, click on the tabs for the workshops, or go to vineeducation.com and get information about that. Make yourself available, or make available to yourself the hundreds of articles, timely articles, on character disturbances, on manipulative behavior, on my blog and website, and avail yourself of my books, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age, The Judas Syndrome, my only book written from the Christian faith perspective, and my book, How Did We End Up Here, with co-author Dr. Kathy Armistead, the Relationships Survivor Guide to Dealing with Our Character Disturbed Age, How to Survive and Thrive in this character disturbed age of ours. And then look at the end of the summer, look for my new book coming out that we've been actually discussing a little bit here today, The 10 Commandments of Character, How to Lead a Significant Life. I take off on some topics that I introduced in my book, Character Disturbance, but a much more in-depth discussion about the essential life lessons that we have to learn in order to emerge in adulthood as decent people. These are lessons that we optimally should learn in childhood, but that we can learn at any stage of the game if we're going to become people of good character. And next week, we are likely not to have a live program. So just look for the announcement at the beginning of the program as to whether we're live. You can take phone calls. Once again, I thank you for tuning in, and I'll look forward to seeing you again on another edition of Matters.
From Against the Wall, and you're listening to UCY